Are you ready? My name is Erika. I have been on staff here since 2016, and I am the event and production coordinator. I grew up in a very creative home. Anything you could ask my dad to make, he was making. And he brought me along for the journey. So I kept up with a lot of art, but I also loved building anything that someone told me to build. I went to Cal State Monterey right out of high school. I graduated early with a degree in visual and public art. I got to curate this wave wall for the Monterey Aquarium where you could encounter a wave from the beginning to the end. Once I graduated, I actually got recruited to work for Abercrombie. I got to become part of their new stores team. So I got to go into spaces from start to finish, from a concrete floor to watching literally it start from the floor to the ceiling and getting to create this environment. Yeah, I honestly never thought that I was going to move back home. Like, I loved Monterey, but I received a text message from my now husband telling me, I'm moving back to LA and you should too. Yeah, we met when we were 15, and at that time he was just one of my best friends. He was a person where I'd go to his family's house after Thanksgiving and after Christmas. So I moved back, got settled in, had a job down here on another new stores team, hanging out with Ryan and our friends. And then about a year into living here, I started dating someone, and that relationship quickly became very toxic for me on a lot of levels, but I became lost in the relationship. And about a year in, I ended up pregnant. And growing up Catholic, I felt a lot of shame, and I was scared, and I didn't know, how people would react to it. And I knew, well, there's no other option, so I'm to stay in this relationship. And at 2 weeks old, I could hear Carson crying in the other room as I was putting stuff away. And I walked into the room, and Carson was laying on his back and was projectile vomiting, and his biological father was passed out on the ground. In that moment, I realized that this was not a healthy environment for my son or I. And I pulled him out of his crib, and as I was leaving, I called my mom. And I was in tears, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And my mom's response was, come home. Roughly 4 months into my son's life, Ryan came back into the picture. That's how we started. And we are now married with 2 kids, and life is wonderful. So Ryan and I have a beautiful family, and everything was great, but we also knew what we were missing was a relationship with God and teaching our kids who God truly is. And so we decided to start church dating. And what that meant for us was go around to the various churches in town and see what was best for our family. And fellowship happened to be one of them. Pastor Albert did an altar call to where you can either come forward or you can stand with everyone's eyes closed if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling scared. But I stood, and tears in my eyes, and Pastor Albert's praying, and as we're leaving, this woman in front of me grabbed me and she said, did you stand? And I reluctantly said, yeah. And I didn't know what she was going to do. And she's like, I want to pray for you. And so she prayed for Ryan and I. And right then and there, I was like, this is our home. Growing up, my mom volunteered left and right. So I kind of grew up in this home of you serve your community, and that's how you become family in a community. It takes a village. So I started serving, and Pastor Becky was currently the lead of the greeter team and all things on campus. And so I started serving with her, and next thing I knew, I was serving in every element possible. Yeah, with realizing how much I was serving at Fellowship, we decided hey, maybe the best bet is for you to work there. And what does that look like for our family? Over a ton of prayer and a lot of looking, Pastor Chuck Olson's role of his assistant popped up. And it literally was picture perfect to exactly what my husband and I needed. Yes, I started with Pastor Chuck in regards to men's and marriage ministry, but it became all of my worlds kind of crashing in together of creating space for people as well as helping people to encounter God. So about a year into working at Fellowship, Pastor Albert's son Isaac and our son are playing soccer together. And one day, Pastor Albert and I were standing next to each other watching the boys play, and my son's biological father showed up. And I had kept my story about my son very close to me because I didn't know who to trust with it. I didn't know how to handle it. I felt still shame, and I felt like working in a church, would I still be able to work here if people knew my real story? He looks over and he sees my son's biological father, and he says, "Who's that dude?" And in my head, I thought, well, Erika, here goes nothing. And I said to Albert, I said, well, that's Carson's biological father. And without even skipping a beat, Albert looked at me and he goes, well, that's his bad. And he didn't say anything else. And we just kept watching the boys' game. And in that moment, I was like, wow, I had never felt more seen by just a simple sentence. With my dad, I was really close with my dad and got to make a ton of different things and learn a ton of different things. And he was always teaching me things and guiding me along the way and creating space for that. That was like my DNA growing up and what I absolutely loved. And then it trickled into my retail work where I got to open up all these new stores from the ground up and create all these different displays and what the store looks like and what it feels like, to then my college years of doing installations, creating a wave wall for people to be able to experience what a wave truly feels like from underneath it, minus being wet, obviously. But to then coming to fellowship, I still get to do that. I still get to create spaces for people to come in and experience something so much more than what we could ever imagine. My husband and I stepped into fellowship feeling so lost and not really knowing like how God shows up in our life. I felt scared. I felt ashamed. My past doesn't define who I am. Hope can be so many different things. But the reality is like even in the darkest of places, you can still come out of it. Being able to sit in hope knows that we have a God that's so much bigger than anything else we could ever encounter.